Okay, here's the topic. We're going to cover these grounds, and I hope we can have an interactive conversation. This is a very useful graphic. It used to be on the Stanford University Technology Licensing Office, and I have found it's a very simple way to describe to people, corporations or leadership at the institution, what it's all about. You go through these steps. Okay, I found it a very useful tool. Relationships. Okay, well, you got relationships with the tenured faculty. They're around for a long time. Then you've got relationships with faculty who want to get tenure. And at Florida State, one of the vice presidents, I was working with a faculty member who got very excited about commercialization. I got very excited about them. And the vice president called me in and said, look, I had the faculty member in and told him, concentrate on getting tenure. And once you get tenure, then spend time on commercialization. So I backed off and realized, okay, let's not get overly enthusiastic. Let's put the priorities where they need to be. Postdocs, grad students, undergrads get involved. You got to be very careful. I had two instances where I had to call in an outside patent attorney to mediate a relationship between a male faculty member and a female student. I won't go into more detail than that. Okay? It happens. I had to bring in someone outside who wasn't part of our community to sit down and talk through and then make a recommendation. In writing, it was going to go to the vice president, and everybody backed off. So there are other relationships. You need to be able to describe, and to me it's very important, to talk to your counterparts elsewhere in your organization who are involved with research and outside relationships. And part of my job, as you heard me say, is the mission of the office is to help the university attain its mission, which meant helping other units deal with intellectual property in their relationships with corporations or other things. So that was part of what we did. Right? And when my boss said, what have you done for me this year? My sheet very clearly pointed out the amount of projects where we spent time helping other offices in the Office of Research do their work. Okay? So it wasn't lost. It was time spent, it was time captured, and it was time used to tell the vice president, we're there to help the institution. Occasionally, if you're lucky, you might get a chance to get to the president and the governing board. At Florida State, I was very lucky. We had a research foundation because when the Taxol money came in, the finance VP realized that if it went into a university account, we were a state organization. The state would take the money out of the account overnight, put it into an interest earning account. They would earn the interest, the institution would not. So because we knew that maybe there's something like $10 million coming in, eventually it was $350 million, we set up an account, and I was able, a research foundation that had its own account separate from the state, separate from the institution, but governed by the university. So I was able to deal directly with the president of the university because of the structuring. And Sandy Dalembert, the lawyer, we had breakfast several times. I said, Sandy, what's important to you? After I get the nickels and dimes to keep the air conditioning on, it's the reputation of the institution. I said, Sandy, we are doing deals with autism, well baby care, the Taxol deal, of course. And he said, John, this is amazing. I want those stories. I want the stories to tell people outside, and I want the stories to go to our fundraising arm at the institution who are looking for donors to donate money. Because these stories will cause quick engagement with a potential donor. So we did that, and we had breakfast, and he said, you know, there are a number of instances where people kind of, okay, make your pitch as to why I should donate. Let me tell you about the autism work we're doing. Really? I know my cousin has an autistic boy. Talk to me about this. And there was engagement. Okay? So the value and the impact of what we were doing partially were the stories. And I was able to deal with the senior levels because we had things of value to the institution. And so, okay, let me leave it like that. Local Chamber of Commerce, Economic Development. I went to a meeting, lunch meeting. I was standing up there, and I could tell them, they were looking through watches like, oh God, hurry it up, hurry it up. I was standing between them and lunch. I thought, uh-oh. So I said to them, how many went to FSU? How many of your kids went to FSU? How many of the kids graduated and left town? Do you want to get the kids back? Yeah. We are doing startup companies that give high risk but well-paid jobs to bring the kids back. Really? Could have heard a pin drop. They totally forgot about lunch. And afterwards, one of the most interesting, influential business guys who ran a recycling center came to me and said, I want you to help us educate our business community to start an angel fund. Not only for spin-offs from the university, but other opportunities that we might see. This is very intriguing. We've heard about it. Now it's time to get our act together. Can you give us a hand? So the value of what we were doing to the community rose up. Regional government. David Day headed the University of Florida, the bigger university. I headed Florida State. We went to the Big Bio meeting, and we decided to invite venture capitalists to come and hear what was going on in the state, largely at the universities and spin-outs and whatever you have. And those venture firms that went to Big Bio came. So we invited the governor of the state of Florida to join us. It was Jeb Bush. Okay? And David stood up, said briefly, here's what I'm doing. John, would you explain what you're doing? Stood up, and Jeb said, wait a minute. David, you're from the University of Florida, right? Yep. John, you're from Florida State, right? Yep. You guys bash heads on the football field every Saturday, right? Yep. And you're telling me you're working together for the long-term health of the state of Florida? Yes, sir. I'm really interested. Tell me more. It then turned out that he had taken a number of initiatives to bring biotech firms from California into the state of Florida. And he sent one of his people to our regular meeting of the directors of tech transfer office across the state. And the guy came and said, all right, Jeb's interested in putting money on the table to help you guys. What do you want? Because we had explained the value and impact of what we were doing to the leadership, he responded by saying, help us craft something to accelerate what you're doing. Okay? And then national administrators, the Bayh-Dole Act, people are very interested. Okay, what are you doing? So we always, as a state, gathered the autumn statistics that went into the autumn annual report that explained the extent of what was going on. And of course, we had gathered ourselves similar statistics for the state of Florida. So when Jeb later said, are you guys taking advantage of the money? Yep. What's happening? Here are the numbers. All right, other people. These are obvious, okay? These are the folks you want to deal with. So This is particularly interesting. Why? Because in Washington, D.C., we practitioners had zero credibility. Academics who were studying a field were considered experts and had great credibility. So we as a community went looking for academics interested in what we were doing to help them gather and analyze the data. Okay? That was part of the importance. So again, relationships. I explained how we went to Big Bio to attract folks that were curious as to what was happening in the state of Florida. Maybe they would be doing deals later, maybe not. It was worthwhile building the relationship. Okay, well, these again, this is the type of content in the relationship. I won't go through it in detail. You can read it. But the bottom here, the national administrators, Congress, for the current president, kept asking the question, what are you doing with all this money we're spending on R&D? And we explained one of the outputs was this commercialization activity. We were able to quantify it. We were able to tell stories about it. So it became quantifiable and useful to build relationships. And also, for this reason, accountability. What are you doing with the money? It's leading to this, it's leading to that. And we had a small gap prototype fund. And I was asked, the boss said, I'm going to cough up $300K. I'm going to commit to 5 years of $300K, so it's there for faculty to use when they want. It's not going to be a 1-year deal, it's going to be a 5-year deal. And I said, okay, I will be held accountable. We'll tell you every year what's happening with the money. One of the cases was a faculty member came to me when we asked him and said, I used the $300K to get preliminary data that we put in a grant application where we got a $10 million award. Now, the data was useful. The faculty members were incredibly credible, so it wasn't just our money. But he said that definitely made the pitch for the application for the money a lot more solid. We'd taken a risk with our own money to get some preliminary data. And again, accountability, usefulness. I've known people who have done their job well, and they haven't communicated the importance to the community. It's a lost opportunity, okay? And with the turnover of vice presidents, okay, sometimes the vice president comes in and says, why am I hiring you here? And you have to have built up a communication network so when the vice president asks you, the answer is, don't talk to me. Go talk to any faculty member. They'll tell you. And the vice president, a faculty member, will talk to another faculty member and listen very carefully as opposed to listening to me try and justify my job. Again, the content, negotiation strategies. I don't want to spend a lot of time. You know what this is all about. This basically says, prepare yourself, sit down and chat with the folks before you begin the negotiation to find out who they are, what drives them, what family is interested in, what the kids do with soccer. And then you begin a conversation about, tell us about your company. And most companies are proud to talk about their company. You want to encourage it to understand what's going on. And then I always ask the question, what are you going to do with our research results? And as I said earlier, 2 cases, the faculty member and I were shocked. We had no idea that the invention we were talking about was applicable to a certain area that they knew a lot about. We didn't have a clue. So rather than getting into the negotiations, we went back and talked to begin to understand what was going on. Listen, and then respond. You heard me say, sure, I'll deal with your license agreement and I'll get back to you in 6 months. I was not being facetious, okay? The General Counsel's office was dealing with more important issues. Land acquisition, sexual harassment, okay? They weren't going to deal with a license agreement. So behind that, of course, I'd gone to the legal counsel in the Office of Research and triple checked the template of the license deals. So she would tell the vice president who had the signing authority, John's template is wonderful, he follows it regularly, and he gives you, the vice president, all the exceptions that you need to be aware of before signing. Then you create the term sheet, straightforward, determine each person's role. We had one negotiation with a small startup that never dealt with universities. The lawyer decided he was going to tell everyone how to do it. And my lawyer, I had told ahead of time, you will keep your mouth shut. This will not be one lawyer better than another lawyer. So we went through that and it took a longer time because of the attitude, but get the lawyers involved early, give them guidelines, because at the end of the day, their job is protecting the institution. My job is protecting the institution, but also taking some calculated risks. They were going to have the final say at some point.
Can I just ask a question related to this? Do your in-house lawyers get involved in your negotiation process?
Not at all. Not at all.
No.
Not at all.
Only the technology managers.
They are interested only in arbitration.
Are your lawyers aware of the nature of the deals that you do?
So we generally explain to them when licensing draft, agreement draft is ready. So we explain, we
Okay.
advise them.
You get their input.
Yeah.
Okay.
More on administrative efforts. The sections differ. So how the agreements have to go through the legal.
Yep.
So that is per se we are bound to inform them that it has to go through the legal.
So just as Richard mentioned, that these are certain clauses which are necessary from legality point of view, and these are some things which are non-negotiable for us as technology managers. So I think that is the arrangement with practically all of us.
Yep. That's the way we dealt with it in the States.
And just quickly, something else John said makes me wonder, do you in your tech transfer function have signature authority?
Yeah.
So you can sign?
Yeah.
Signature authority is in terms of agreement,
License agreement?
license agreement, no. I think none of us have here.
No. The DD they have as per the guidelines they are used like.
Directors and
So maybe
Directors names.
where the guidelines or the policy permits, those people can sign. But in our institution, of course, from our team, we cannot sign. The institutional head, that person will sign.
but there are different arrangements in
Is it
different
an
organizations.
easy
Yep.
process? Is it cumbersome?
No,
Is
it's
it time
easy,
consuming?
easy
It's easy,
process.
okay.
Yeah. I never wanted signing authority. I always wanted the back door. Okay? Argue. I got to go check with, knowing what the answer was ahead of time, of course. And the company was appreciated. The fact that my job was to not only negotiate, but to get the deal through the bureaucracy at the institution and then help make things happen. That was my job. Okay?
Mine was completely different. I signed. So I like that. I like that approach
Best
sometimes.
position to be in.
I have to go talk to my manager kind of thing.
Okay. Here are some things that I found very useful. Once you get things signed, have a signing ceremony. Okay, we've done it occasionally, face to face, usually remotely, just satisfied. And at that point, I double check that everybody realizes what their responsibility is, particularly my faculty member. Okay? And it works well because it's a joyous occasion. And it's easy to talk about it. All right. Also at that time, we just, anytime we signed a license, it went to our secretary who had an Outlook, it was an Excel spreadsheet called the deal dates. And so there was a deal, and then the dates of reports, royalties to be received for each one, and then a mechanism that a month before, there was a notice that popped up. And then she was able to send a very polite but typical letter reminding, oh, by the way, licensee, our agreement, paragraph, whatever, just want to remind you reports due. Here is the format. That format was an appendix to the license agreement. So when you got a report back, it was fairly comprehensive because it was easy to fill it out. Okay? And then when we got a report of the royalties, here were what we wanted to see. I got once a piece of paper that said sales X, royalty Y. Now we went back and we undertook a further discussion to get a better understanding what sales in particular countries were. We always had an audit clause that we exercised from time to time. And one case, the auditor went in, looked at the books. The manager said, you know, we've really horsed up. We've used your technology here, which is reflective in our report, but we forgot that we've also used it over here in this product line. And so there was a double check of what was going on. And when we had the deal with Bristol Myers Squibb, $350 million in royalties, I phoned the royalty manager up when I arrived and said, we're going to exercise the audit. He said, I'm delighted. The reason I'm delighted is I want you to tell your community that Bristol Myers Squibb pays its obligations. And by the time we had at least 300 million to be audited, there was a discrepancy of $100,000. That was it. Small amount. We went back to them, argued back and forth, and they paid us $90,000. So it all worked out. So the value of the satisfaction of doing it on a professional basis of the audit was something that Bristol wanted to spread through our community. And that got accomplished.
Before you go on to the next one, let me make a comment here about this last one, about meeting to review. So, first of all, in all your agreements, you have listed the persons for contacts. Yes, okay, number one. And that person may or may not be what I call the ombudsman. The ombudsman, which is a problem solver. Probably.
Maybe just contact this complete address and names are given.
We just give the name,
Contact
of the person, like in case of,
But the point we have.
ombudsman kind of, like, I mean.
Well, they can be separate. One is just like.
The notices if you need
Yeah,
to
yeah.
serve,
Notices,
Right.
like,
then you mention
No,
those
no, no.
key
Just
words.
let's let it complete once so that we understand the perspective.
But the other issue is this ombudsman role, which may, in our office, was kind of the person who negotiated the deal. You know, if it was a problem, if there was a problem that we saw developing, we would go back to the person that negotiated. The tech manager would go, is this a problem you could solve? And so we had a little process there. The other thing I was going to mention is that for really, I'll call them really valuable, really important, you know what I'm talking about, those license agreements where there's a lot going on, maybe there's a lot of PR aspect to it, whatever. We learned over time that it would be a good idea to put in regular meetings in the contract, that we will agree to meet once or twice a year or something like that. There would be some regular communication because that would that avoids so many problems.
There is a concept of joint monitoring committee.
Ah.
That takes care of regular meetings.
Yeah.
To answer your question, John, in our agreements, we have only the name of the contact person in case there is any communication. Nowhere
Same in ours.
Line managers are usually the one who will, liaise it with the institute leadership for resolving it.
In the agreement, that is all.
The name is not, because they are not the legal entity.
Well, all right, hold on here. Our agreements always name the technology manager, but never as a party to the agreement. They were named as the contact person. So the company knew who to contact. And if the person moved on, okay? So the company always felt there was someone inside our office dedicated to help them sort out issues. And we too had our licensing, we had a small shop, we had 2 licensing managers and me, we each had a portfolio. We would contact the companies maybe once every 6 months for a big deal and once every year. And how's it going? Oh, fine. No, sorry, that's not good enough. Let's talk some more to understand what's going on and listen for what's not being talked about. And occasionally it's a case of, oh, it sounds like our faculty members not pulling their weight. And so I had to have a conversation with the faculty member because of what I was not being told when I contacted the company. Again, as I said earlier, relations with the companies, you've got relationships with the individuals who will likely move on. The corporation may shift its strategic focus and you're outside the box and waste of time. Termination. That reminds me, termination. Let me talk about that for a second. So, termination. The Taxol license was a process license, 4.5% royalty, amazing. And then Bristol moved from being a chemical company to being a fermentation company. And they told us this. So our royalty went like this. So we decided to terminate the license. And the termination was only to have a specific conversation about what Bristol was going to do with the knowledge they had taken on through the license. You may use it internally. If it turns out that it's used in a product that comes into the marketplace, you have the obligation to inform us. And we'll have another negotiation. We had to trust them on that. So many times it's useful at the end, for whatever reason the license ends, to have that type of conversation. Occasionally, the relationship is so bad, you can't have that conversation. Simply, you terminate, that's it, and everybody moves off and does other things. Okay, I'm done. I've covered these issues. We've got a little bit of time left. Are there any questions? Go ahead.
What is the royalty negotiation mechanism?
Sorry?
What is percentage we negotiate? 3%, 5%?
Royalty negotiation percentage.
So there are 2 aspects. One is the commercialization status, then royalty recovery.
Okay.
Many times companies don't come back to us. They commercialize it or not. It's only telephonic or mail communication. So for 10 years we put some royalty number. So what practice do you follow to recover the royalty?
Same process. What are you going to do with our research results? And then the next question is, tell me what you're telling your senior management about the importance of the deal. Okay? So you begin to get a broader understanding of what's going on. Then you focus down on the product or the service. And you realize that this is a potentially therapeutic drug. 2%. It's an antibody. So you can sell it as a diagnostic, a biological diagnostic, okay? 6%. You could sell it as a consumable research compound, 10%. So the same deal covers 3 different types of products with 3 different types of royalty rates. How do you set the royalty rates? I always phone my friends. I would go over to the University of Florida that did a lot more life science deals than we did. have permission to talk to the licensing person. What do you suggest in this situation? Well, John, we just did a deal over here, and I think it's appropriate, and you can tell them that another university did a deal with a typical company without naming it. The royalty rate in the last 6 months was X. Okay? So, I would be able to say, I've consulted a number of colleagues who do a large number of deals in this particular area, and the rate they use for this type of product is X. I think we should use X. Okay? Many times, the negotiator was able to take not simply the number, but my rationale to their senior management. And the senior management said, I don't know what sort of rate. Well, Mr. Fraser consulted with, oh, okay, well, that seems more reasonable. Now I want you, the corporate manager, to go out and find out what other corporations are doing with other universities. And surprisingly, the rates are similar. So all of a sudden, the rationale was such that the senior management at the corporation felt, okay, that's a reasonable deal. Okay? Anyone else?
I think if I may add, the issue was that practically that once we define the rates of the royalty and the product is commercialized, and when the royalties are due, actually the real reporting, it doesn't happen. Actually, that was the case. And what should be the actual mechanism to have those actual numbers so that we can figure out the values that the lab should, or the
There's what's called a breach clause.
Yeah.
And if that happened after polite conversation, there was persistence of go away, don't bother me, we sent a letter once. We are of the view that given the circumstances listed below, that there's a potential breach of the license that might lead to termination of the deal. Once their corporate lawyer got that, things changed because the technology was important to the company. So we followed a process that ultimately was one lawyer banging another lawyer on the side of the head and saying, hey, come on, it's in black and white that we need to do this. Once it turned out the reports were not coming in because of staff turnover, okay? And the new person wasn't aware and et cetera, et cetera. So fine, we worked it all out. Okay? Right? Answer the question?
Yeah.
Someone else? Sorry?
Yeah, I would request Richard to comment on probably post-contract management, how it is done. If you could throw some light, because it is not part of the sessions that we have planned for today.
For this group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if he can throw some light on that, probably few of their questions would be answered once you're finished.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question that do you have any reporting mechanism after the license agreement is done for royalty reporting? Do you have any format in which they have to report back to you?
Yes, the answer is it goes into the license agreement. This is the format that you will use. Oh, it's too complicated. I don't care. It's simple, it's straightforward. And when that manager talks to the sales folks who will provide the numbers, we got the data. Yeah, I'll download it. There it is. Boom, done. End of conversation.
So you mentioned about the deal closing ceremony and you reminding of the duties to each party. So how do you remind the duty of inventors, your faculty? Like in what words? That is a very tricky thing actually.
I always required the faculty member to sign the license agreement, but never as a party, always as I hereby have read and acknowledge the deal terms. So when things did not happen, I would talk to the faculty member. And if I got a non-response and the company was unhappy, I'd escalate it up. And in one case, the vice president called the person into their office, closed the door, and things changed. It was that serious. Other
So
questions?
let me just add to that because it's a little different flavor for us. And that is, first of all, we would never include the inventor, any obligations on the part of the inventor in the license agreement. We only grant one thing, that is rights to use our IP. We never include know-how. Why? Because that would require that we somehow could deliver the inventor, and we just don't have the ability to do that. So we were talking about this after lunch about how do we deal with the fact that inventors need to often provide some hand-holding, help, advice, etc. So we would do it informally, have conversations with the faculty, say, look, there's an expectation that you'll put in a couple of hours or so of answering calls and something minimal, but you will answer calls and help out a little bit. And I would tell that to the licensee, and we would have a three-way conversation, same room. Let's all agree on what minimal level is going to be delivered and expected. Beyond that, you need to have a separate agreement, a separate consulting agreement. And for us, and I don't know exactly how Florida State did it, but for us, that consulting agreement was between the licensee and the inventor. We're not a party to it.
We did that. We were not a party to it, but we went to the inventor and said, look, we're both deeply concerned about the IP. So we want to see your consulting agreement before you sign it. And in most cases, okay, fine, not a problem. They wanted to blot out the consulting rate, not a problem. We were interested in what the IP clauses were.
And we have, just like us, we have in our, and this is important for all of us, to have in your IP policy a clause that says that anyone who falls under the IP policy cannot enter into an agreement with another party which would cause them to be in conflict with the IP policy.
So, Richard, when you say that the separate consultancy agreement is signed between the inventor and the institute, I mean to say, or the industrial research center, you were saying you
No, between the inventor and the licensee.
Okay, inventor and the licensee, it will be through your industrial research center?
No.
You said we are not the
We're completely out of it.
No, what she is meant is, in Indian context, the signatory is always the dean director for the industrial consulting. Application rules.
No, so what I'm asking, Richard, you use the word that we are not the party. When you say we, you mean the tech transfer?
The institution,
No.
the university.
Okay, so that means this is sort of a offshoot of the IP policy wherein the inventor and the licensee are separately getting into an agreement.
Correct.
That should be within the umbrella of the master agreement which institution has signed with the licensee.
Well, no, it's not under that agreement, completely separate. The only link here is, as I say, that the faculty who falls under the IP policy cannot enter into an agreement if there's any violation of the IP policy, and the IP policy takes precedence.
So in our case, like all the consultancy agreements are also through institute only.
Yes, that's what I was coming
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
So money comes to the institute, not to individuals.
And that's the way, I don't know, so Ashley mentioned this yesterday. Oxford does this as a part of their business. They license consulting arrangements, it's part of the
Well,
deal.
Let me explain that in more detail. I went over to a conference in 2008 where there were 6 of the largest universities that set up offices to help faculty obtain consulting. That was their job. They would market it, they would help negotiate the deal, the rates, they would worry about the paperwork, then they would issue the appropriate forms for taxation. And what the 6 big institutions found, it made the consulting a lot more easier to do, and it was done right, as opposed to this deal over here that the faculty member regretted 5 years later. So in the United Kingdom, I was on a panel where this was described. I stood up and said, there ain't no way this is going to happen in the United States, and sat down. Because as Ashley pointed out, it's much more personal. And the provosts consider it a privilege of the faculty member to be allowed to do consulting 1 day a week. In the United Kingdom, they set up offices, but only in the big 6, to help make sure it was done properly. But again, the deal was the consultant, the employee of the institution, the company, okay? And I forget the degree to which the institution was involved. I think they might have acknowledged what was going on, but it was clear the two parties were the employee and the company. Anything else?
Yeah, one more question, sorry. When you talk of licensing, such a case, if there is a spin-off to whom the technology is being transferred, how is the conflict of interest managed? One. Second thing is, again, will there be a case wherein say, a technical show-how will be managed by a consultancy to the faculty?
All right. In the state of Florida, the state legislators had declared that conflicts of interest are illegal.
Illegal.
They're illegal. You'll go to jail. There are exceptions, such as university-sponsored research offices. Okay? So when our university, University of Florida, had a similar process, and that was when there was discussions of a spin-out, the vice president, as part of the formal process, would call a meeting of all the parties and explain to them, there's potential conflict here because you're our employee and you're going to earn money from over there, and you might, so don't ever show up for your 8 o'clock Monday morning lecture tired because you worked in your company until 12 o'clock midnight on Sunday. All right? Then there were 2 instances the vice president of research at the University of Florida told me that so-and-so wanted to do a spin-out, faculty member. And the vice president knew the individual and said, there is no way I'm going to allow that to happen because that person has misused funds, has abused their situation. So the vice president said, you're calling a meeting to get everybody together to talk about the spin-out. I'm the chairman. I'm not calling the meeting. So nothing happened. It didn't happen because he knew too much about who the individuals were and he wanted to avoid the whole thing. So then further, in Florida, we had a conflict of interest disclosure statement. In this instance, we believe there's potential for conflicts. We describe it. The parties sign off and date it. Okay? Then there's a conflict of interest management plan. Given the first document, here's how we're going to handle the conflict. Each of those relationships were reviewed yearly by the Office of Research lawyer, a faculty member, not anywhere near the faculty member doing the spin-out, and someone in the Office of Research on the administrative side, usually an associate VP who was equivalent to a dean of research. They would review it several times because this was brand new on our campus. They and I would visit the laboratory where this research was going on and sit down and have a conversation. Look around the table and realize someone was squirming in their chair over there. So I would always have a big smile on my face. Anyone wants to send me an email to have a further private conversation, delighted to do it. Okay? And in one instance, I got a phone call. I need to talk to you about this. All right? My background in Canada was such, I was at the National Science Foundation of Canada, where there was a major conflict of interest that blew up at McGill University because a trustee of the institution was investing in a spin-out headed by the chairman of the office who controlled access to this big piece of equipment, and a graduate student said, I can't get my degree because they're hogging the machine during the day. It went into the newspaper. So all of a sudden, VP's research in Canada became quite aware of these issues, raised a process. And as I mentioned, maybe not here, the University of Wisconsin sent a letter out to employees saying, you want to be involved with the spin-out? Terrific. It's academically acceptable. Here's the process. Here's the letter of request for access to your own technology to license. Here's the template of the license deal. And as I said, page 5 of the document, it said, okay, you're our employee, you got responsibilities. You're probably married, you got a family. You may have community obligations. And you want to do a spin-out? Are you nuts? That's what it said. And that brought to the attention of people, oh. And people appreciated, it was a Midwestern university, the University of Wisconsin, appreciated the practical comments. Okay. And so I had a couple of instances where a faculty member said, I want to do a spin-out. Go home and talk to your spouse. And in one instance, the faculty member came back and said, I'm not going to do it. My wife is a smarter business person than I am. She pointed out that the market that I was targeting was much too small for the amount of time I was going to have to put into the company. So I'm not going to do it. And I realized, good advice. So it wasn't done. Okay? Anything else further?
Let me just add one little quick comment about it. I agree with John, which is there are certain key rules, no abuse of graduate students, and a few other rules. We really don't like the idea that a startup spin-off in which a faculty member has ownership will fund that faculty's research. That's almost never allowed, and if it's allowed, there's a peer review panel within the department to watch over all of it, so we don't like that. But here's my main comment. Conflict of interest, conflict of commitment is, at Cornell, is all managed by the dean of the college. And most importantly, tech transfer office, we're not involved. I mean, are we involved? Of course we are. We're heavily involved, we're aware, and so, we will talk, and maybe we might even sit on a conflict of interest committee on occasion, but I'm not an enforcer. I'm not the police, so we stay out of that.
Okay. Anybody else?
We have one question, and it is related to a research agreement, and wherein it was an international agreement, and our institute had a agreement with the other institute, and the professor signed that agreement. And then later on, when it was on the enforcement side, when we contacted the university, there they say they didn't recognize this agreement. So how, he had no authority to sign it, and he signed it and we agreed to it. So how to recognize the authority in the international agreements? Yes, we know that terminology is used for the authority in some locations, but not universally. So how to deal with such kind of situations?
Well, part of it is knowing what's going on. And if you're not informed and everything works out fine, okay. But if there's a problem, you got a problem. And we had one instance where that happened. There was money being spent by the Dean of Engineering for the project before money was received from the company. Okay? And the Vice President phoned him up and said, you owe us $100,000. No, the company owes me. I don't care. Your account's in debt $100,000. How are you going to pay me back? The faculty member then went back to the company, and there was a tough negotiation, and it got sorted out. But that was only because we became aware of what was going on because there was a problem. Okay? Ultimately, I insist on the fact, as I said, insist on the faculty members signing a license agreement, not as a party, but simply, I've read and acknowledged the terms. Okay? Well, we do it. Okay? That's the way we do it. So there are different ways in the United States. There's a lot of flexibility. Each institution does it differently. But if you, the faculty member has no authority to commit to the use of the faculty member as an employee, people in their laboratory, or the equipment in the lab to an outside party. They have no authority to do that. It has to be done by the central vice president of research. And again, if there's a blow up, it's a case of, you got a problem, fella. And in one instance, let me finish, there was a legal suit. Okay? And so the dean was prepared to step in and put money on the table to finance the legal suit. The vice president said, no, I'm only going to allow you to put in 50%. The faculty member is going to finance the rest of it. Boy, that shook everybody up. It turned out to be incredibly messy, but the signal went out. Transparency is what we're all about. So be very careful. Okay?
So we would try to educate faculty that they don't have the right, they don't have the authority to to bind the university in agreements. So we would try to tell everybody that, but yes, occasionally we'd get something signed inappropriately, and we would, first of all, we tell the faculty, you can't do this. We would call the other party, go, this is a problem. We're not really bound. Now, would we try to live up? We didn't want to leave our faculty hanging there like, oh, they're in trouble and that's going to. Most of the time we could just say, look, we're going to redo this agreement. The proper people will sign it. But if it were a real big problem in which the university had some kind of major liability or something, then we've got a bigger problem. But most of the times it's a simple fix.
Anybody else? We done?
If there is a licensing agreement where they've licensed to a pharma company and it gets acquired by another company at a later stage, does that agreement become null and void automatically?
In our case, absolutely. Faculty cannot, a license agreement, no way would we honor that.
But if it is favorable for the licensee in the sense that they're going to fund the rest of the clinical trials because it's a bigger company who can afford to do that, can we continue that agreement?
Our agreements say that if there's a change in control, then we need to be informed ahead of that. And I forget what our wording was, but it was effectively, unless there's a major change and disaster strikes, we're going to approve it in advance, but come forward with it ahead of time. And therefore, the acquiring company, their lawyer, understands, you want to do that? Okay, tick box, let's make sure that's done. Then our right to the license agreement upon acquiry is nice and clean.
And I would say that most of the time, what we in the Tech Transfer Office try to do is be problem solvers, not problem creators. So I think what we would do is we look and go, is there a way for us to resolve this issue expeditiously? No harm, no foul, we can do this. So we would strive to do that. And most of the problems were solved by rational approaches. We don't take the heavy-duty legal approach on most, but sometimes it does get elevated to that level. We've had situations, yes. Be careful.
Explained with one of the spin-outs at the University of Florida, the vice president always chaired a committee, not a committee, it was a gathering of all the relevant people. That was part of the formal process, and if he was concerned, there never was a meeting. It never happened. So he when Phillips had an opportunity to short circuit something that he knew was going to go sour 100%. It just was not going to happen. Why? Because the faculty member had fouled their own nest previously. The faculty member had no fallback.
Question is that when we talk about the TTO's self-financing, means self-sustaining model, So do we consider the IP expenses into it, or it is a separate thing? TTO has the IP expenses to bear?
My approach was we tracked, we engaged the lawyers, we paid for the lawyers out of the patent fund, the intellectual property fund. And when it came time to do accounting and reporting, there were two separate columns: intellectual property expenses and operating expenses. And when I was asked how come there was two columns, I explained these were not ongoing daily operating costs to run the office. These were long-term investments in the creativity of the institution that can be used either now or maybe later in 10 years. People began to say, okay, total cost of running the office $1.5 million, but $1 million of that is from the patent expenses. Okay, we accept that. And the vice president was able to find money from the overhead to pay for those expenses because it was a long-term investment. Some of which got turned into deals, some of which did not. That was the risk. So, two separate conversations.
One quick question. So in US universities, when the TTO supports for patent filing, either US patent or PCT filings, do they also for how long do they keep on supporting a particular patent? And also, do they go for national phase filing? And because every inventor will say, okay, I want to file my national phase in like 20 countries, and they don't know where the licensee is.
My answer is, we'll file a US patent. And if there's a conversation about a potential spin-out, we will pay for the front end of a PCT, $5,000. We do not have the attitude or the money to do national filings under the PCT. But I always paid for that so that when the spin-out became real, or not, there was an asset on the table, the possibility of seeking patent support to be paid by the investors in the company for national patents. We never could afford it, we never did it, and we never regretted it.
I will just add to what John said, is that we didn't limit it to startups. We would just say, based on the technology, is there a global opportunity? And if there is, okay, maybe we're going to file a PCT. And so we would do that. And so it was very much on a case-by-case basis. And then what happens, you go market it like crazy. You try to find a partner. You try to find a partner that will take an exclusive license, maybe in the US, and pay me enough. When I'm figuring out my license fee, I'm also figuring out how to get enough money from that so that I can pay for the PCT, so that I'm covering the rest of the world. But it does get difficult. When you get to national phase and you don't have a licensee, the number of inventions that we pursue that way is small. But sometimes we do, and sometimes we win, and sometimes we lose. Case by case.
Sorry. The other answer to your question is, how long do you hang on? In the United States, there was a maintenance fee imposed after the grant of the license. I think it's every 3 years or so.
3.7
3711.
3.711.
So we ride along for 3 years, no problem. 7 years, we talked to the faculty member, if they were still at the university and they were still interested in the technology. If they were, we'd ride along. But if there was no licensee, shortly thereafter, we just abandoned the whole thing.
I licensed a patent with 2 years left in its life.
Yeah, there are.
Just because we believed in it, and we went to the bitter end with it. I mean, that happens, right? I mean, in your portfolio, you find some things like that.
I want to stress what he said. There's certain projects you're going to go for hell and high water, okay? No matter the cost, because you believe in it. You believe in the faculty member, you believe in the opportunity. And I had 3 instances of that before at State University. We did 12 deals a year. I was there 18 years, so you can figure out how many deals there were. But there were 3 where you just, we had a technology that if you are a premature infant, the baby comes out and doesn't know how to feed itself. Okay? And goes into the neonatal intensive care unit, where the nurse picks the baby up with a bottle and holds it until the kid figures out how to feed themselves. Hugely stressful. The parents are crazy about this. This is hugely stressful. Jane Stanley in our Department of Music Therapy figured out, let's put together a plastic nipple with a chip in it that will detect the motion of the kid's lips. And if the kid is doing what is called nutritive feeding, sucking properly, the chip turns on a tape recorder. The tape recorder has a lullaby of the mother's voice to the baby. And that Pavlov feedback reinforces. Turned out, she'd done a clinical trial at a local university. Usually the kids were in there 10 days. Kids went home a week early. $2,000 a day, huge savings. Stress reduction for the child and the family. Okay? And so there were passionate deals. We went to the altar 3 times. First time, the company was acquired by a much bigger company who thought the market for the device wasn't big enough to handle it. We walked away. We did a startup. The startup CEO had a lousy relationship with the board and the other people, and the inventor failed. We said, all right, let's try it again. Finally, we found a venture capital company in the south of Florida who had an analyst who had done medical devices before, and she stepped up and said, I'm going to take it over. Okay. Her firm invested. We put the whole thing together, and it really took off. And it was acquired by a medical device company in Arizona, so it still exists. And it took 8 years. And there was no way we were going to abandon that project. Okay? We had a couple. There was Bob Holton and Taxol. Okay? And there was one other, I just can't think what it is. Anyway, there were 3 passion cases. Okay? And the vice presidents, of which I had 4, was told there were certain situations we were going to spend money because of this and that. And the vice president would then check A with a factory number, and then B, try and understand who the factory number was. Well, Jane was married to the chair of the Senate. Okay? So we were going to bend over backwards anyway. And there was one other instance where we went to bat. I wanted Ashley to tell you at the beginning, you got to analyze who you're going to work with and whether you think it's going to work or not, because it's going to be a long-term relationship. I deeply believe it's like getting married. It's fun, it's interesting up front, you get married publicly, okay, you sign a document, and then the real work begins. The product gets developed, kids show up, and the real work begins. Okay? And maybe it's successful. Maybe the markets move beyond. But you want all that to happen, and you stick with it, no matter what's going on. Okay, anybody else?
How the IP is seen before the grant and after grant in with regard to taxation asset. When do you consider IP as an asset? From the filing stage or after the grant, when it is said to be an asset?
When it is a fixed asset, it comes under, so normally in the book of account it is shown as work in progress, right? Is when it is in prosecution. The day it is granted, you capitalize on the work in progress to fixed asset. Yeah, and it starts depreciation.
How about US?
The intellectual property is an asset from day one, the moment it is disclosed.
Okay.
The value of it is 0.
So the day it's monetized, you have a value, and then
If the patent is granted, it raises the value. If a company comes and decides to license it, it raises the value. But again, people people have asked me, what's the value of it? It's not worth anything until the company is able to take it into the market and things happen. Then it's really worthwhile. Why? Because it might save lives. Never mind the royalties getting paid. It might save a life. It might increase the quality of life. Or for a company, it might increase their productivity and competitiveness globally. There's the real value. And there's the story value that you can take up to your senior management, who can then tell others who are skeptical about all this money being wasted on R&D at a ivory tower institution. No. We're addressing real societal problems. And in some instances, it comes down to a product that saves a life. Okay, are we done?
I just have a few quick comments listening to John on this subject of relationships and kind of the soft side of things that I'm not sure when I get a chance to talk to you again about it. I think they're little tidbits that could be very valuable for you maybe. One is, I mentioned to the group upstairs, and I teach this now quite a bit, but I haven't mentioned it to you. One day I sat down and I went, oh gosh, I was reflecting on some of the successes that I'd had in licensing. And I go, what were the elements of success? And that's when I realized that there was this type of helper, this type of entity that had been instrumental in commercializing my technology and helping. And I call them commercialization allies. They're not licensees. They are entities who do not want to license, either because they're not for profit and that's not what they do, or they're for profit, but that's not their business focus. But boy, do they want your technology to be successful. Just a quick example, and I challenge my students, I challenge everybody to go out. If you got a technology, you can go find commercialization allies, and they can be incredibly helpful in your process. Just for an example, if you have an invention that involves, some kind of a cardiac therapy, for example, or diagnostic, you can get in touch with the American Heart Association. That's the sort of thing that I mean. And they'll go, oh, interesting. Oh, how can we help you? Sort of thing. So that's one. The other is the importance I learned of cultivating a pool of entrepreneurs. Start today in developing a pool. Start looking for them, finding them, and there's all kinds of ways you can get creative. You can take your technology and, the tech brief, you take your tech brief and you go around and you go, hey, would you take a look at this technology for me? Even in people in companies, and I'm not asking you to license it. Would you take a look at it and tell me what you think? Is it viable as a startup? And then later you pop the question, you'd be interested in a startup? You can recruit entrepreneurs. So that's one of the things that I learned that really adds to your potential for success. Also, commercialization allies, also campus allies. You'll find people on campus who love this whole idea of IP tech transfer. Not just inventors, but administrators, heads of departments, and go, oh, boy, this is great. Can I help you? People who run newsletters for their college, for their departments. They'll put your technologies in their newsletter. Or sometimes they'll get involved with private sector, even with licensees management. I've had department chairs who become my deputy to handle some kind of interactions with private sector. So that's one thing, campus allies. Licensees being involved in promotion of your function. So when you have signed agreements with licensees, you got a good relationship, they're moving along, and then bring them into some events and, let them tell the world that how easy it was and great it was to work with you as a tech transfer office. So everybody likes that, maybe even if they can bring some examples of some of the products. That's another thing. We created, what do we call them, like shadow boxes or little display boxes of products or representations of products. Do you do that around in your office? It's great. It's great PR. And then last two things. One is the industrial liaison. That is, if you ever step back and wonder what it's like to be a company and knock on the door of your institution, they don't know where to go, they don't know how to find their way around. Think about how companies can find their way. MIT has an industrial affiliates program where it's all very nicely laid out. So that's one thing to think about if you want to develop better relationships and engagements with the private sector. Lastly, something that I did not think was worth anything. People would say, oh, you're inventors, you ought to reward them. And I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, if we make some money, they get a third. Isn't that reward enough? And they're like, well, no, you should reward them all, even those who you don't commercialize their technology. And I just like, oh, people don't care about that sort of thing. Well, finally, I acquiesced and I said, okay, let's have an Inventors Award ceremony. So and it didn't cost much. We had these nice little brass medallions made for anyone, any inventor whose patent was issued in that year. And it was an evening event. The vice provost for research shook their hand, they walked up, their name was called, their patent title, shook hand, here's your medallion, and they got free dinner, a nice dinner, and everywhere I would go, the buzz was so, and people would all the faculty who were inventors would prominently display it on their desk, and I was like, wow, was I ever wrong? People love that stuff. And it didn't cost much. Boy, were we heroes. People are like, wow, I want one of those. So.
Anyway, that's enough.
We did a similar thing at Florida State University, because it took me a year to realize that universities handle personnel in a very lousy manner. Universities don't know how to say thank you. So the vice president decided, when I went to him, he said, I want this type of dinner. All right, let's do that. The inventor invited their family, particularly the graduate students and postdocs. Local licensees had small tables around the outside. And it was really a community event that was covered by the local newspaper. And as Dick pointed out, the name was called, the patent was called, and the person went up and shook hands with the vice president, and a picture was taken of that event. And a couple of times, the faculty were very appreciative and had the picture in their office. Okay. Now, the other thing I want, I had an undergraduate degree from Carleton University in Ottawa, where I told you I managed the beauty contest and got a degree. I then got into Berkeley. Okay? Getting into Berkeley is not easy. I got it. Then I realized I didn't want to be an academic. I realized why. Because I had to teach. And I was a good teacher. But I was standing at a lectern getting older while the audience was getting younger. I thought, I don't want to do that. And I realized I was going to have to grade papers. And if there's anything I hate doing, it's ranking people. Even in a quantitative sense of an exam. So Kath and I agreed, we're going to pull the plug. And I got hired by Judy Van Laer because I won the beauty contest at Carleton. Okay, going on to a career closely allied with university technologies. At the NSF Canada, okay, for a number of years, then a venture capital company focused on academic spin-outs, and then moved back into the States because Kath is American, to do a startup company in '86 when the Bayh-Dole Act had been passed, but there was still a significant number of universities that didn't know what to do. So we offered the service of training people and functioning for them as a tech transfer office for 5 years. We took a cut of what we brought in, okay, and we sold the business. So that's why I do what I do. I'm now finished as a salaried employee and consult. And basically, the three of us, again, we don't want to tell you how to do it. We want to tell you what we've learned and how we screwed up. Okay? So you're aware of this. And then we can come to instances like this and say, you ask a question, here's my opinion. Okay? And you think, oh, I hadn't thought of that. That's interesting. Or, there's a question over here. How would you handle something like this? I do it that way. Well, I tried that and it didn't work. What else you got? Okay, that's occurred. So we're at a point where we need to give back to the community. Okay? And we're delighted to have been here and had this opportunity, and thank you for taking the time to listen to us. I think we're done. This is the last event.
Well,
We're
Tomorrow.
One more day. Okay. One more quick question.
Yeah,
quick
so
answer.
this is regarding interacting with the industry, potential licensees. I mainly work with the healthcare related technologies, diagnostics, therapeutic devices, and all. So we have a portfolio of technologies, and I run around, and suppose I got hold of few big companies, either MNCs or Indian big companies. I tell them, okay, I'm giving you, these curated out of 100. I'm telling you, giving you only top 25. Have a look. Do you think anything of interest for you? And they will have a look. And then I say, this is for now, but I can give you more. Okay. At some fees. Can we have a retail restrict fees? Give us something yearly.
Oh, a subscription, like a subscription service.
And we are trying to engage them in that way. It has not converted so far. But they say we want to have some more value. I mean, we want to have some meaningful conversation where we really feel we are going to invest in some company. We need some time because I have to go to my boss and I have to convince the CEO of the company that can I pay TTO so and so amount of money. So, what is your experience? Is this thing like normal? Or
No.
is it like, it's like you can...
I don't know anybody who's been able to do that.
I do.
Do you?
The University of Florida, which does probably 30, maybe more license deals a year, had been in place since the 80s. Okay? And Jane Muir, who was the marketing manager in the office, went through all the license deals and then set up a database and indicated to people in a certain market, if we get a disclosure in your area, we're going to make it available to everybody on our list and let us know if you're interested. So it helped the scouts of those companies keep a pace of what was going because they didn't have to reach out. She reached out to them. The subscription fee was $0.
Oh, yes, we did that. We just didn't charge.
You said zero.
It was not a revenue generator, it was a lead generator.
Yes.
And the corporations were very appreciative. She got a number, she got called, turned it over to the licensing person to handle and explain what was going on. And they found it was a very productive way to generate marketing leads. So it was a good tool. They too, like most of the universities, had a awards recognition for commercialization. And in several instances, the vice president of research, particularly our university, had a dinner for faculty that had brought in grants that year. At the University of Central Florida, the VP took it another step and formed the $1 Million Club. Those faculties that cumulatively had brought in more than $1 million had a special recognition. So there were several ways to raise the profile and thank the faculty who usually worked on the weekends, long hours, long trips here and there, to say thank you very much. Okay.
And I'll just, one quick anecdote related to this idea of subscription sort of thing. I took a technology in an industry and nice tech brief and send out the intro letters, and my response was less than 5%. Sound typical, right? I just didn't get very much response. And, I call people and they're like, well, maybe, I don't know. But I then decided to change my approach, and I took a little while, maybe a month or so, and then I wrote a different letter with the same tech brief. And the letter said, look, I'm putting a technology in front of you. You and I both know the chances of this being a fit for you is maybe not high, but that's not what I'm really doing here. I'm trying to create a connection between your company and this Cornell Technology Transfer Office to create a pipeline of a flow of innovation. And would you like to have access to that flow? Response rate went up to about 75%. Yes, please. Oh, yeah, I never charge anything for it. I wish I could make money for it.
It's not a cash generator. One final thing. Early in my career, the one-page marketing documents, we called them business opportunity documents. I don't like the word technology brief. It's focused on the technology as opposed to the business opportunity. Right? So be careful of the wording that you use because it carries weight. And you're dealing with very busy people. And you've got 10 seconds to capture their attention to actually read it. So try and keep it brief. Put together what Dick has described as, would you be interested in the flow of what's going on? Great, we're very happy.
And just one other thing on that theme, one of the things I started, remember I said cultivating a pool of entrepreneurs, I started to really look for, to dedicate time and energy to finding entrepreneurs. And I created something that I call the Venture Vision Summary, which was basically a tech brief, tech brief. But I called it the Venture Vision Summary, which basically a 2-page tech brief that was all about the potential opportunity for a startup. And I used that to market it to potential entrepreneurs and investors and potential board members.
Along that line, Columbia, Harvard, MIT, and a number of significant big guys in the Northeast put together a website of documents like this of venture opportunities. So for entrepreneurs, they could go to one place and find out what was going on in a number of universities. It was simply a teaser document that then led to a follow-up and a more substantial conversation. They marketed that for about 5 years, and I don't know what happened to it. I haven't heard anything from it. But centralized place on behalf of a number of institutions. You're not giving up IP or anything else. It's just joint marketing. A couple of pennies from each supported it, and apparently it worked quite well. Okay, we're done. I'm telling you, we're done.
We're really
Thank you
done.
very much. And let's hear about tomorrow.
Yeah,
And let's hear
so-
about what happens right now.
Yeah, so I think many of you are coming here for the first time. So there's a tour if it's not raining. For those of you who are interested, it will take us around 15 minutes or so. And after that, we break for high tea in the cafeteria where we had lunch. Tomorrow we start early at 9:30. Yes, 9:30. So first session is on valuation by Dr. Ashley Stevens and Dr. Cahoon at 9:30. So we meet here at 9:30 tomorrow. Before that, we'll break for high tea, and before that, the tour for those of you who are interested.
Good. Thanks, everybody.